Hey, it's Allie. Welcome to my channel. So I know it's been a long time since I've posted a video, and I'm sorry about that. It just has been a little crazy and busy around here, but I'm hoping to make sure that I post at least one video a week, and I have some exciting new ideas for videos that I can't wait to start. So today's video is the mid-year book freakout tag. If you don't know what that is, it's a tag that's going around with booktubers that talks about their first half of the year, and it's different questions about the books that they have read or they might want to read. I'm really excited to do this. I like looking back at what I have read, and I feel really accomplished this year because I have read, so I wrote down my stats here for the first half of the year through the end of June, and I've read 37 books total in the first half of 2021. 21 of those books were fantasy, although one of them was House of Salt and Sorrow, so that's kind of like a fantasy horror novel. And then I had 9 historical fiction, 3 contemporary, 3 romance, and 1 thriller. So you definitely can tell that fantasy is my favorite genre. The first question is, best book you've read so far in 2021. And that book for me has to be The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo by Taylor Jenkins Reid. And if you have read this book, it probably comes as no surprise to you that this is my favorite book so far this year that I've read. In this book, we follow Evelyn Hugo, and she was like a 1950s, 1960s, all the way to the 1980s, like popular, famous celebrity from movies. And she had gone through 7 husbands. But we start off in the book with Monique, who is a journalist in present day, and she ends up going and interviewing Evelyn Hugo for a biography. I loved how this book was written with the interview style, and it just kept me hooked. I constantly wanted to pick up this book and read it. It was so good. As soon as I was done, I texted my sister and said, "You have got to read this book." The second question is, best sequel you've read so far in 2021. Now, I haven't read a whole lot of sequels this year, so I don't have a ton to choose from. But for me, so far this year, the best sequel that I have read is Poison's Cage by Brianna Shields. And this is the second book to Poison's Kiss, and this is a duology. But this book follows a girl that has the ability to poison people with her kiss. And she's used as an assassin, but she's being manipulated the entire time. There's not many sequels where I can say that I'm happy, like 100% happy with the ending of that series, but this book is one of them. Now, not everything in the end of this book was a happy ending, but there were some parts that had a happy ending, some parts of it were sad. It all came together really well, and I was very happy with the ending of this duology. All right, the third question is new release you haven't read yet but want to. And for me, the first book that came to my mind was The Four Winds by Kristen Hanna. I love Kristen Hanna's The Nightingale. It was so good, but it was so heart-wrenching. I don't know how many times I had to pause reading that book because it just had me in tears. And that's probably the only reason that I haven't picked up The Four Winds yet. I just quite haven't been in the mood to read a very heart-wrenching story. My aunt had texted me and said that this was the best book that she's read since Where the Crawdads Sing, and if you guys have watched my favorite book list video, Where the Crawdads Sings is one of my favorite books. So I know that this is going to be a good book, and I really want to read it. I just have been hesitant to pick it up because I'm not sure that I want to get so emotionally invested in a book where it kind of brings my emotions down. I've kind of been, for the summer, wanting to read more happy-go-lucky books, but I definitely want to read The Four Winds sometime soon. The fourth question is most anticipated release for the second half of the year. And for me, that is Our Violent Ends by Chloe Gong, and I believe this book comes out in November. It's the second book to These Violent Delights, and I'm pretty sure that it's only going to be a duology, so this is going to be the conclusion to that story. And I picked up These Violent Delights at the beginning of this year, and I was actually pleasantly surprised about how much I liked it. I really love retellings, and These Violent Delights is a Romeo and Juliet retelling, but it's in 1920s Shanghai. And Shanghai is split by 2 different gangs. I believe they are called the Scarlet Gang and the White Rose, I believe. But Roma, who is this book's version of Romeo, is part of the White Roses, and Juliet is part of the Scarlet Gang. But not only is this a Romeo and Juliet retelling in 1920 Shanghai, but there's also a monster that is ravaging the city and killing everyone. So Romeo and Juliet have to come together to solve this mystery. These Violent Delights ended on a cliffhanger, so I can't wait to get to Our Violent Ends and see what the outcome of the story is. Now, number 5 is biggest disappointment. So my biggest disappointment of this year was Outlawed by Anna North. I was so excited to pick this up and read it. I love Westerns, and I was expecting like a Western that had lots of fighting and gun shows and all just different kinds of things like that. All the typical things that you think of when you think of a Western. And this did have maybe 1 or 2 scenes of that. Not very many. This was a pretty slow read, about 75% of the way through. It got a little faster, but that one scene that picked it up a little bit was gone before you knew it, and it just wasn't what I had expected. Like, I was really in the mood for a Western, and this just did not meet my expectations for a Western. I was really hoping to love this book with it being a female main character in a Western, which you don't get very often, but I was just really disappointed with it. Next question is biggest surprise. I kind of answered this question already earlier, but The Poison's Kiss duology by Brianna Shields was a very pleasant surprise to me. So I went into this duology not having any expectations. I picked this up after Outlawed, which obviously was my biggest disappointment. So I picked this up after Outlawed. I just needed a book that I had no expectations going into it. And I picked up these 2 books and I could not put them down. I think I read the 2 books in like 3 days. They were just so good. I felt like with the first book, we could have gone a little bit more in depth with certain things, but overall, it was a really good, solid book. I loved the storyline. And then the second book was even better, and it just had the greatest ending. Not very many times are you happy with the ending of a series, and this book just hit all the spots that it needed to. All right, question number 7 is favorite new author, debut or new to you? And this probably comes as no surprise, but Taylor Jenkins Reid is probably my new favorite author. She's definitely an author that if a book would come out by her, I would definitely pick it up and want to read it. Just like Kristen Hanna is to me, all of her books I want to pick up and read them because her books are just so heart-wrenching. Taylor Jenkins Reid's writing is beautiful, and I love the way that she narrates her stories. I'm just so excited to read more of her work. All right, question number 8 is newest fictional crush. Now, I don't really have fictional crushes per se. I have like favorite characters in different books, but I guess I would have to say if a character was my new crush, it would probably have to be, I'm stuck between 2 characters, but it would probably have to be Luce from The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue. I feel like people who have read Addie LaRue, they either really love Luce or they really hate Luce. He's the bad guy in this story. So in this book, Luce is the bad guy, and it won't give away any spoilers, but Luce is darkness. He's just this material form that darkness has made himself into. And he's just such an interesting character. There's so much to him. And me and my sister have talked about this character and kind of gone in depth. There's just so much to discuss about him. And people can have different thoughts and opinions about him. He's just a very in-depth character. I feel like a lot of the bad guy characters in different fantasy stories are kind of one-dimensional. There's not a whole lot to them. But Luce has so much more to him, and I feel like V.E. Schwab could even write some novellas about just kind of his escapades that he has with his other deals. Now, question number 9 is newest favorite character. And since I used Luce as my fictional crush, the other person I was thinking about was Nikolai Lantsov, which is from the Grisha-verse, and he originally showed up in the second book of Shadow and Bone, which is Siege and Storm, and this series is by Leigh Bardugo, and a lot of people know it now, especially because of the Netflix adaptation. But in the trilogy Shadow and Bone, which is Shadow and Bone, Siege and Storm, and Ruin and Rising, I feel like Nikolai Lantsov is the best character in the entire trilogy. Nikolai is just so funny and witty, and he has passion for what he wants, and he goes for it. A lot of the characters in Shadow and Bone aren't as likable. I feel like a lot of people who like the series and enjoy the series, the other character that they enjoy is the Darkling. But I read this series after I read The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue, and in some ways you could compare Luce to the Darkling, and I just feel like Luce is way more in-depth and a better character than the Darkling. So it's hard for me to say that I really like the Darkling because I'm making that comparison. But Nikolai is just so interesting. And I'm so excited to read King of Scars because that duology is about Nikolai himself. He's the main character in that book. And I cannot wait to read more about him. I felt like in Shadow and Bone, we just didn't get enough of him. Question number 10 is a book that made you cry. I hate to be repetitive, but I also wanted to be very honest with these questions. So the book that made me cry, Evelyn Hugo made me cry a little bit at certain parts of it. But the book that made me cry the most, surprisingly, was Poison's Cage by Brianna Shields. I know I'm being repetitive with this duology, but oh my goodness, the sequel, the end, the very last chapter, the last, I don't know, maybe page or two of this book, the very last page of this book made me sob. It was just, oh my goodness. This is why this book is so good. The ending just gives the readers what they want. I can't say enough about it. I don't know why more people aren't talking about it, but this book was just so good. Hey guys, I'm just jumping in here real quick because I realized while I was editing this video that I forgot to tell you question number 11, which is a book that made you happy. And that for me is Because of Miss Bridgerton by Julia Quinn, which is the first book in the Bridgerton prequel series. And this book just made me happy because it was two people that had known each other their whole entire lives, and they became friends, and then they end up falling in love with each other. And I think there's just something so sweet about stories that are like that. So I'm sorry I forgot to put this in there. So I just wanted to tell you real quick what my answer to that question was. Question number 12 is most beautiful book you've bought this year or received. And for me, that would have to be Witches Steeped in Gold. This book is the Owlcrate version of it. I did get the Fairy Loot version of it, which I will be sending to my sister. But I just love this cover. I love the artwork of the two female characters on this. And on the inside, there's artwork on the inside of the dust jacket. Not to mention the tree on the hardcover case. But this is the inside of the dust jacket. And I absolutely love the artwork on here. I feel like the female characters just pop and they look absolutely gorgeous. It's just so beautiful. The last question is, what books do you need to read by the end of the year? And the answer to that is a lot. I need to read a lot. I have a lot of books on my TBR, but the main books I want to get to is Daisy Jones and the Six by Taylor Jenkins Reid, Malibu Rising by Taylor Jenkins Reid, and of course I want to get to Four Winds by Kristen Hanna. And then I said I want to read hold on one second, gotta go to my other stack of books. So I'm currently reading Six of Crows. I'm just over halfway done with that book. So then I need to read Crooked Kingdom, which is the second book in that Six of Crows duology. And then, like I mentioned, I want to read King of Scars and Rule of Wolves by Leigh Bardugo, which is the duology about Nikolai Lantsov. So those are just a few of the books that I can think of off the top of my head, but I definitely have more books that I want to read by the end of the year. So these are just the main ones I think that I'm gonna try to read sooner rather than later. I'm sure there are a lot more, but we'll see. I haven't been reading quite as much as I've been wanting to, just with it being summertime. But once school starts back up, my daughter's going to kindergarten this year and my son will be in second grade. So both of them will be in school and I'll just have my 1-year-old then. 1-year-old, almost 2-year-old at that point. I can't believe he's almost 2 already. But I'll have him and I'll do some school stuff with him, but I'll definitely have more time, like when he goes down for nap and when he's doing his independent play, I'll have a little bit more time, hopefully, to read. Thank you guys so much for watching my video. Let me know down below if you have read any of those books and what you thought about them. I'd be interested to see if anyone feels the same way as I do about Luce and Nikolai and what your favorite book of the year was as well. Make sure before you go to hit that subscribe button and the bell icon if you want to be notified when I post new content. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time. Bye.